want to talk about my new Onkyo TX-NR6050, which is a 7-channel receiver, and I want to talk about why I bought this particular receiver. I want to give you some context about the room that I'm going to be installing this receiver in. Well, I'm going to be testing it out in my current theater. This is an 11-channel setup. It's a 7.2.4 setup, so I have 7 bed layer speakers and 4 Atmos speakers, along with 2 dedicated subwoofers, SVS PB3000s. I have videos on pretty much everything. I have videos which I go over this room in detail, multiple videos, so if you're interested in those, I'll put some cards up there, and feel free to peruse all my other videos if you want to learn a little bit more about this room. So I guess the way I see it is, if I'm currently using an Anthem processor, which can process up to 15 channels, which is 4 more than what I'm currently using. I bought that because I'm actually moving to a new house, and with the new house comes a new theater, and with the new theater I'm gonna have an even bigger home theater room, and so I'm actually gonna be maxing out and then some of the processing capabilities of my Anthem. I also have 2 Emotiva amps powering everything, so right now this theater is maxed out as far as the quality of processing, the quality of amplification that I got going on in here. And this is a definitive technology speaker setup, so all the speakers in here except for the subs that are their SVS subs. So that kind of gives you some context of where I'm coming from in this room. So I'm going to be installing this 7-channel receiver in here. Ultimately, what I'm trying to see is if I can install a $400 receiver that I bought in Costco, and can I get a really good experience? That's basically the answer I want to provide in this video. I did review a budget Costco receiver not too long, maybe over a year ago. That was the Denon receiver. I think it was the S760 or something, if I remember correctly. The results were surprising. It gave me a very good theater experience, to be honest, and I'm going to expect about the same from the Onkyo. I believe it has has similar specs. This one actually does provide a little more power. I think it's at 90 watts per channel, two channels driven. The Denon had 75 watts per channel. A lot of people are going to be like cross-shopping those 2 receivers, and even though this one has been out a while, I'm going to kind of throw my hat in the ring, and I bought it because moving to a bigger house, I'm going to have more rooms, and I believe this one's going to go in my music listening room. I'll see, or it might even go in my office temporarily, but I do have a use for it. So I'm going to be testing it out in this room, and I'll actually be using my my Samsung 82-inch television that's in my rec room, and I will be testing out all the HDR functionality and all that with that television using a very long HDMI cable. So, but it will be set up in this room. But yeah, let's go ahead and get this guy set up and see how easy it is. So let's cover some specs for the Onkyo TX-NR6050. Again, this is the Costco Onkyo receiver that you can buy for $400. Routinely goes on sale, and for $400 typically is $500. I think in both cases it's a really good deal. At $500, you're getting a lot of features, Most notably, this has HDMI 2.1. 3 of the HDMI inputs can actually support 8K. 3 others, then there's another 3 that can support 4K, up to 4K 60. And I know, in my opinion, that's more than enough. Most, maybe you have one PlayStation. Maybe if you're like again, when you're talking about getting up to 8K or 4K 120, you're pretty much thinking about gaming. There is no 8K content as far as video out there, really. Other than the occasional YouTube channel that actually posts 8K video. It just doesn't really. It's not really a thing yet. So I don't think it's a downside that it only has 3 inputs. Maybe if you're like a really big in gaming, maybe you have both the Xbox Series X and the PS5, and you can have them both running at 4K 120 with this thing, and still have one to spare. So I don't. Actually, I think it is very well equipped. Again, this thing can handle all the newest HDR formats, including Dolby Vision, HDR10, HDR10 Plus, HLG. It can handle, I believe it packs 90 watts per channel, 2 channels driven. Obviously, when you're driving all 7 channels, you're going to be getting way less than that. probably in the order of 50-60 watts per channel. As far as aesthetics, some people say that Onkyo isn't doing, people kind of put Marantz up on a pedestal as far as being like the nicest looking receiver. I don't really find that as much as a problem. I kind of like the look, the industrial design looking of. It looks like a receiver. You take a Marantz, yeah, it looks a little better, but it still looks like a receiver. It's a big black box with a knob and a couple of buttons. This one is just the same thing. It really is. I don't really consider that to be an issue, and the way I see it, it just looks like a receiver. There's not much you can do to the design of a receiver to make it look sleeker or more modern. Again, Marantz is probably doing the best in that regard, but I do think it looks fine. It looks like a nice receiver. And Onkyo has been plagued with some HDMI issues, HDMI board issues. In fact, I had an Onkyo which I repaired on this channel that had, where the sound just stopped working, and it's just I had to repair it with like a heat gun and solder, but yeah, I think they've addressed that. They've addressed a lot of the issues. They even put like a fan on top of the HDMI board, so hopefully they ironed out all the kinks. But I think this is a very viable option if you have a smaller budget, but yet you want to have a very good home theater experience. So I like showing off the HDR capability through my Xbox, because in the menu system it shows you exactly what this TV can do. This is a Samsung. Samsungs notoriously do not support Dolby Vision, so it doesn't support 4K at 120, and obviously it doesn't support Dolby Vision for TV or playing games. But I do like how it does lay it out for you right there. So let's go into here again. Let's go into video modes, and you can see that I can select 4K, HDR10, auto HDR, and auto low latency mode, which is something that my TV does support. It doesn't support VRR or Dolby Vision, like I said. So we're gonna put on a game real quick and see if it'll. So as you can see, it said ALLM, auto low latency mode there. That's pretty cool. So automatically did that. It showed you that it turned on. And again, this is my Xbox Series X. I also have a PlayStation 5, but I think it's sufficient to see that it works with HDR quite well here. Yeah. Yep. There's one of the guys there. All right. Anyway, as you can see, it works good on the Xbox. So this is me about 4 weeks after I filmed most of the footage that you saw in this video for the Onkyo 6050. So I needed to report something that I've noticed specifically with one of my TVs. The issue lies with my 70-inch Vizio M7, and basically it just doesn't work. The HDR doesn't work. If I have to actually put the TV in for some reason, this TV is kind of strange that you can actually change the HDMI mode. You can actually change the HDMI mode from 2.0 to 1.4. And the only way that I could get the TV to work with this particular receiver was changing it to HDMI mode 1.4, which means no HDR, and no 4K 60. So I was stuck at 4K 30, basically making the receiver behave like a receiver that's like pre HDMI 2.0, which in other words 6-7 years old. I have receivers that are that old, and they're basically not entirely obsolete, but pretty much obsolete, I would say. I felt that this was I had an obligation to report this, that for some reason I don't know if it's all Vizio televisions, but this particular TV, I tried everything. I could not. I changed the HDMI cables. I tried different cables. I tried the best cables that I had, like HDMI 2.1 rated cables. There's nothing I could do. And I actually looked on forums and message boards and stuff, and other people had reported behavior like this with other Onkyo receivers. But for the record, I have plugged it in. I plugged it into a Samsung television that I have, and it worked perfectly fine. And I've also plugged it into my Epson projector. Everything worked fine. So I don't know why this issue occurred, but I do have to mention it. Whether or not you'll have this issue, I don't know, but you'd probably be okay. Again, unusable with that TV, like completely unusable. It's not even worth it. I would, if I had to use it with that TV, I would have returned it. I wouldn't keep it. It's not worth keeping because it's basically unusable for that. And there was I tried updating firmware. All the firmware was up to date. There was nothing I can do to fix it. So it's just like a glitch in the firmware of the TV or the Onkyo firmware. I don't know. It's just some kind of big problem that they're not playing well together. But anyway, that's all I got to say about that. Let's continue with the review. I've had the TX-NR6050 in my room for about 2 or 3 days. I watched a couple of movies, watched some of my go-to scenes, including the Top Gun Maverick, like Canyon Run, the couple of scenes from Avatar: The Way of Water. I watched a whole episode of Succession, just to kind of round it out. So I wanted to include some action and some, Succession is basically a dramatic show. So let me talk about the negative things about the receiver. I'd found that the Accueq wasn't the most accurate, calibration system that I've used. I think a lot of people, it's widely known. I think that's why Onkyo is kind of, is pivoting over to Direkt, as a lot of companies are as well. I found that pretty much all my other Onkyos have had like Odyssey built into them. They've been more accurate, let's just say. With this one, I had an issue that came up repeatedly that I couldn't get rid of. That the right front speaker was way, at times it would be like at 0.1 feet from my listening position, when the left speaker was at like 12.4 feet. Very big difference, and I was actually throwing off the whole system. And when I first turned it on without even doing adjustments, it just sounded like all the volume was coming from the left side of the room. And I actually had to, I had to level match it manually just to get it to sound good with my phone using a decibel app. By the way, that's an easy trick. If you think, just to double check the numbers, the levels were close. I tweaked a few here and there just to get them at at about 71.5 decibels or so, 70 decibels, 70. I got it pretty close to where if you get it if you get it within like a decibel, maybe a decibel and a half, you're in pretty good shape. And in that regard, the Accueq did a pretty good job. The distance thing on the right speaker, specifically, it was the right front speaker, was way off. Like, I actually changed the microphone. I used the microphone that I used for my Pioneer Elite, and it actually improved it. It took it from 0.1 foot to 6.5 feet, so it improved it. So I don't know what's going on there. And in addition to that, you may think, well, why didn't you update the firmware? After I had this issue with 0.1 feet, I updated the firmware, ran it again. I had basically the same result. It doesn't like something about my room. Maybe it doesn't like the bipolar speakers. These are the definitive technology. My speakers are bipolar, so maybe it just doesn't like them. Maybe it's just my right speaker is a little too close to the wall. To that wall. Maybe it might, for all I know, it might be doing it for some reason. But when I listened to it that way, it didn't sound good. Until I just brought it up to about 12 feet, because the right speaker is slightly closer to my listening position. So I got it much closer to the left. Anyway, I fixed it manually. So if you come up with that issue with one of your speakers is way off distance wise, give it a listen. It might be doing it for a reason, but in my case, I adjusted it and it sounded better to me. Another thing that I noticed was that the center channel was like it set the crossover at 200 hertz. When this, it can absolutely handle. It can produce way more bass than 200 hertz. So I set the crossover to the center channel at 80 hertz. I adjusted some of the crossovers for some of the other speakers, like the surround. It set the height speakers to 40 hertz for some reason. I took that to 80 as well. I took the surrounds to 80. I am running my fronts at full band because again they have built-in 12-inch subwoofers. They can handle them. I think it's fine. And also it'll take a little load off of the receiver. So those are the negatives. As for positives, I think it sounds great. Whoever says a 5.1.2 system is not enough, you know, I think they're just trying to upsell you. I'm in a room that I have 11 speakers in this room, and I swear to God, I was listening to this thing and I was not missing the other 4 speakers. Let's put it this way. I feel like the speakers that were set up in the system were kind of compensating, and honestly I could barely tell the difference between, like, I didn't have my rear surrounds connected and I could barely tell the difference. The sound was enveloping. The Atmos track for wave water, all the ambience and all the underwater sounds that you hear in that movie just came out very clearly, and I think it did a really good job. I think what I'm trying to say is that, you know, you can get an absolutely great Atmos experience from this receiver and from a system with just 7 speakers. At $400, this thing was an absolute steal and brand new with warranty from Costco. They have a pretty good warranty program, so I feel pretty good about this. I feel pretty good recommending this receiver to anybody. If you're looking for a budget receiver, you really can't go wrong. This has all the bells and whistles that most people are going to need. If you eventually want to, like, increase your speaker count, this receiver is not going to allow you to do that. You have to be happy with 7 speakers. If you're not happy with it, then this is not your receiver. You're going to have to, you know, pony up a little more money, maybe get a 9-channel receiver or even an 11-channel receiver. That'll definitely give you a lot of room to grow. But if you're happy with 7, like I said, I have an 11-channel system, and 7 speakers sounded really good in this room. Good enough that I could be absolutely happy with it. This receiver is actually going to go in my office temporarily until I get, because I'm actually going to run another 11-channel system in that room. But for now, I'm going to just run 7 channels with this guy, and I'm going to enjoy it. I like the fact that it's HDMI 2.1. Can handle all the latest HDR stuff, you know, 4K 120. It handled everything quite well. It's a really good buy, this thing, for $400. You really can't go wrong. And 90 watts per channel, 2 channels driven. I absolutely had no issues giving me all the volume I needed. Again, I should mention this room is treated with acoustic panels, so this is probably one of a better case scenario for implementing a surround system. As long as you take your time and, you know, go over, you know, don't blindly go with whatever the Accueq says. Review the numbers. Review the numbers that it came up with. Adjust the levels. Double check the distances and check the crossovers, and you should be okay. Anyway, if you have any questions about the receiver, feel free to leave them in the comments. Again, I had a blast with this receiver, and I think you would too. And yeah, it really helps the channel a lot if you can like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.